I want to tell you about a phone call I had with my client few weeks ago. David owns a perfectly ordinary house, 3-bedroom, brick built in 70s, about 12 minutes walk from his local train station. He owned it for 11 years. He rang me because he was thinking of selling it and buying something better. So I asked him one question. I asked what the zoning was and roughly how far the walk to the station was. And then I told him that the thing he was about to sell had quietly become a development site now, and that he has been owning a development site for past 18 months without anybody telling him. Nothing about David's house had changed. Same bricks, same roof, same tiled kitchen. What changed? What he's allowed to build on it. And here is why I am giving this whole episode. This is one of the biggest expansions of what ordinary people can do with the ordinary block in the New South Wales in decades. It went through in 2 stages. Most of the coverage was about apartment towers, council arguments, and the practical bit, the bit that applies to a normal house on the normal street, barely got explained to people it affects. So that's today. What actually changed? How to tell in about 10 minutes whether it applies to you. Exactly what you are allowed to build, and importantly the reasons you might look at all of it and sensibly decide not to. Hi, I am Anita Kumar, the co-founder of ANP Buyer Agency. Let's have a look at your backyard. Welcome back, and if you are new, lovely to have you. My business partner Pratiksha and I run ANP Buyer Agency. We both came out of IT, which is the strange doorway into the property until you see how we work. We came to this through a data and systems, not through the sales, and planning rules are in the end just a system with inputs and constraints. Once you can read it, it stops being intimidating. Now the disclaimer, and today it's genuinely matter more than usual. Everything in this episode is of general information only, not a personal, financial or the legal planning or the investment advice. Planning controls have exceptions layered on exceptions and vary block to block, and they change. Nothing here is a substitute of a town planner looking at your actual site. What I'm giving you is a map, not the permit. And one honest framing before we start, because I don't want to oversell things. A planning change doesn't make you money, it gives you an option. What arrived in New South Wales isn't a profit, it's a permission, and permission is only worth something if the numbers underneath work. If you have got the borrowing capacity to act on, and if you have got the temperament of the 18-month project, plenty of people will read the rules, run the feasibility properly, and decide to do nothing at all. That's a perfectly good outcome, and I will show you how to reach it. But you cannot make the decisions if nobody's told you the option exists, and for an enormous number of owners, nobody has. Right? So 4 parts will be there today. What has changed, whether you can build it, what you can build it, and whether you should build it. So let's see what actually changed. This came in 2 stages and they do very different things. Almost everyone conflicts them, which is where the confusion comes from. Stage 1, from 1st of July 2024, dual occupancies and semi-detached homes became permissible in R2 low density residential zones across all of New South Wales. Read that again slowly because it is the sentence that matters most in this episode. All of the New South Wales, not near station, not in a nominated centers. R2 is a standard suburban zone. It is what most of the detached housing in the state sits on. Historically, whether you could put a second dwelling on your R2 block depending on the council you could happen to be. Some allowed it, many flatly didn't. That patchwork is gone. If you are in R2, dual occupancy is on the table as the starting point. Stage 2 came from 28th of February 2025. This is the one that got all the headlines, and it's a narrower but much deeper. In 4 regions, Greater Sydney, Central Coast, the Lower Hunter at the Newcastle and the Illawarra Shoalhaven, new controls apply to the residential land within 800 meters walking distance of the 171 nominated town centres and the trains and the light rail stations. Inside those catchment, you are not just talking about a second dwelling, you're talking about terrace houses, townhouses, manor homes, residential flats, buildings, shop top housing, depending upon your zone and how close you are. The stated ambition is up to 112,000 homes every 5 years. Now, the bit I want you to actually hold on to, there is a mechanism buried in that matters more than any of the height limits, and it's called as a non-refusal standard. Some people call them as a non-discretionary development standard. Here is what that means in plain English. Normally, when you lodge a development application, councils weighs it up. They can refuse it because they think it's too big or out of character, or they might simply don't love it. That discretion is why development feels like a gamble to ordinary people, and honestly, that's where most people never try. And a non-refusal standard removes that discretion on the specific measures. If your proposal complies with the stated floor space ratio, height and the lot requirement, the consent authority cannot refuse your application on the grounds that it doesn't comply with those things. That's the transfer of power, not total. They can still assess plenty of matters, and I'll come back to that honestly in the segment 7. But on the numbers that used to be the most common reason for the knockback, the answer has shifted from maybe to yes. If you comply for the first time, small developers, maybe is what kills you, not the cost, the uncertainty, and it's still moving in the same direction. The Planning System Reforms Act is rolling out through 2026, and there is a new Development Coordination Authority from July 2026 consolidating referrals across up to 14 government agencies into the one entry point, which matters because agency referrals are where months of holding costs quietly disappear, and a new targeted assessment pathway with a 50-day approval time frame, and the projects including 10 to 15% affordable housing can assess floor space bonuses of 20 to 30%. The direction of the travel is unusually clear. That's rare in planning, and it's the worth paying attention to. So let's see, am I in it? We can do 10-minute check, right? Practical 3-step, and you can do all of them for free sitting on couch. Step number 1, find your zone. You want the zoning on your title. Your council's online planning map will show it, and your section 10.7 planning certificate states it formally. R2 is the low density residential, R1 is the general residential, R3 is the medium density, and R4 is the high density. If you don't know your zone, you don't know anything yet. Start there. Step 2, measure the walk, not the crow fly distance. This is where people get wrong, and it cuts both ways. It's 800 meters walking distance along actual street and footpath, the way a person would really travel. So block that looks 600 meters away on the map can fall outside of the catchment if there is a river, a rail corridor, or the golf course between you and the station. And a block that looks too far can be comfortably inside of the street network that runs straight. So open the Maps app, drop in the pin on the station or the center, set it to walking distance and read the numbers. It takes 30 seconds and note the split. 0 to 400 meters is the inner area with more generous controls. 400 to 800 is the outer area. The boundary is worth knowing precisely because it makes a substantial difference. I'll show you how much in a moment. Step 3 is check what rules you out. The reform carries real exclusions, and this is where you save yourself from getting excited about nothing. The controls don't apply to the land at the high risk of bushfire, flooding, or in the evacuation constrained areas. They don't apply near the dangerous goods pipeline or in the aircraft noise areas. Heritage items and heritage conservation areas are out, and 4 local government areas are excluded entirely: Bathurst, Hawkesbury, Blue Mountains, and Wollongong. Most of that shows up on your section 10.7 certificate, which you can order from your council. In most places it costs somewhere around $60 to $160, and it's the single best value document in the property. If you take one action from this episode, order one for the property you own or the one you are considering. So zone, walk, exclusions, that's the whole gate, about 10 minutes and the price of the certificate. So what you are actually allowed to build. This is a section people will rewind, so I am going to go slowly and give you the numbers cleanly. These are the non-refusal standards, the floor, not the ceiling. Council can be more generous. What they can do is refuse you or not meeting the standard you have met. So dual occupancy, minimum lot 450 square meter, minimum width 12 meters, maximum height 9.5 meters, floor space ratio is 0.65 to 0.7 to 1. That is for the dual occupancies. For terraces, minimum lot is 500 square meter, minimum width 18 meters, height 9.5 meters, floor space ratio is 0.7 to 1. For townhouses, what the rules call multi-dwelling, minimum lot is 600 square meter, minimum width is 12 meters, height 9.5 meters, floor to space ratio is 0.7 to 1. Residential flat building in R1 and R2 zones, minimum of 500 square meters, minimum width of 12 meters, height 9.5 meters, floor to space ratio 0.8 to 1. And then two that changes the picture entirely. Residential flat building in R3 and R4 zones, inner circle, that's 0 to 400 meters, height 22 meters, which is about 6-story, floor space ratio 2.2 to 1. Same zone, outer area 400 to 800 meters, height 17.5 meters, about 4 stories, floor to space ratio is 1.5 to 1. Let me put the floor space ratio into plain English, because this is the number that actually governs your project and it's the one people find slippery. Floor space ratio is how much building you are allowed relative to the size of the land. The ratio of 0.65 to 1 on a so in a 600 square meter block means you can build roughly 390 square meters of the floor area. At 0.8 to 1, that same block gives you about 480 square meters. At 2.2 to 1, the inner R3 number, it's about 1320 square meters. Same turn, very different building. And that's the whole reason a 400 meter line matters so much. The two houses on the same street on the 380 meters and the one at 420 meters are now sitting on a genuinely different assets, not because of anything you can see from the footpath. To make it concrete, a 700 square meter R2 site in the inner area, that is the 0.8 to 1, gives you roughly 560 square meters of the floor space, which is the envelope that can accommodate handful of small apartments over the 3 levels, and the pre-reform position was 2 dwellings. And on 1200 square meter R3 inner area site 2.2 to 1, you are looking at roughly 2640 square meter of the floor space, the scale of the project that simply wasn't available on that land before. I am not suggesting you go and build 26 apartments. I am showing you the size of the shift. Now here is a piece that gets the least airtime and for most ordinary owners matters the most. Building a dual occupancy gives you 2 dwelling on 1 title. That's useful, 2 rents instead of 1, but it's not the real price. The real price is subdividing them into 2 separate titles, and the R2 zone, the threshold for torrent title subdivision is minimum of 225 square meter per resulting lot. Let me explain why that number is so important. Torrent title means each lot of its own freehold property, its own title deed, and it can be sold as its own, mortgaged on its own, valued on its own, transferred on its own. No body corporate, no shared insurances, no strata levies, no committee meetings with the person on the other side of the wall. That's a fundamentally different asset from the strata unit, and the market prices it that way. So run the arithmetic. 225 plus 225 is 450, exactly the minimum lot for the dual occupancy. The alignment is deliberate. It means that in principle 450 square meter R2 block that supports a dual occupancy can also support the subdivision of the dual occupancy into the 2 freehold lots. One title in, 2 title out. That's the mechanism, and it's why I keep saying David's house changed without changing, because the block that produces 2 independently sellable freehold properties has different options, different financing treatment, and a different buyer pool than the block with a tired 3-bedroom house on it. 2 honest caveats straight away. Subdivision is a separate approval process from the building approval with its own requirement. Services to each lot, driveways, drainage, easement, surveying, it isn't an automatic and it isn't free. And meeting the minimum area doesn't guarantee a workable design, which brings me to the single most practical thing I can tell you today. The legal minimum frontage for the dual occupancy is 12 meters. In practice, 12 meters, you are trying to fit 2 driveways, 2 entries and 2 dwellings that don't look like one squashed building on the width, where every one of those things is fighting for other. Most planner I trust will tell you that 14 to 15 meters is where the design starts to breathe. And so when you're looking at the blocks, the legal number is 12. The number I would actually want is 14 or 15. That gap is where a lot of first project come unstuck, and it costs you nothing to know that in advance. So how do you find out whether any of this is worth doing? So 4 numbers, and in this order: cheapest first, same discipline as everything else we do. Number 1, what we can build, floor space ratio times into the land gives you your envelope. That's your 2-minute calculation once you know your zone and your catchment. Let me give you the real figures and then the warning about them. On ABS data, for most of the recent full year, new houses in New South Wales ran about $2,396 per square meter. Nationally, the average was about $1,967 and Victoria was about $1,914. Queensland was $1,987. South Australia was $1,788 and Western Australia was $1,585. Townhouses nationally averages around $2,493 per square meter, and apartment are the one that surprises people, and it's around $4,533 per square meter, more than double of a house because of the lift, fire services, basement and the common areas. Here is a warning: those are the averages of the completed dwelling, not the codes. Your actual numbers depend upon your site, your slope, your finishes, your builder. Different sources publish wildly different figures because they are measuring things differently. Use this sanity check a project, never to budget one. And the direction matters as much as the level. Construction costs rose 31.3% in the 5 years to March 2025. That's not a typo. Forecast escalation for 2026 sits around 4.1% in Sydney and Melbourne, 5% in Brisbane, 5.1% in Adelaide and 5.5% in Perth. So project you cost today and built in 18 months is not a project you costed today. Number 3, what are all other costs? This is where amateur feasibilities fall over, and I want to be specific because vagueness here is what hurts people. Design and documentation, planning and building approval, developer contribution, and these are significant. They vary enormously by the council, and they are single most commonly underestimated in the line of the small development. Service connections, water, sewer, power, and any headwork charges that come with them. Surveying and the subdivision process itself, landscaping and the driveways, holding costs. You are paying interest on the land that produces no rent for the length of the build. Selling cost, if you are selling, and a genuine contingency because something will come up. And number 4 is what's it worth at the end, not what you hope. What comparable finished product in the street has actually sold for recently with evidence. Then the whole thing in one subtraction, end value minus every cost including your land minus margin you require to take the risk. If that comes out positive with room to spare, you have a project. If it's a marginal, you don't, because marginal project don't survive a 5% cost escalation, and you heard that escalation is running at. And notice something about that sequence. Number 1 and 2 are free and takes an evening. Number 3 and 4 cost money and needs professionals. So run number 1 and 2 first on every site you are curious about, and only pay for 3 and 4 for the ones that survive. I'm not going to stand here and tell you what margin to accept or promise you what any of them will return. That depends entirely upon your site, your cost, your circumstances, and anyone who quotes you with a number without seeing your block is selling something. What I can tell you is that this is the arithmetic. Do it in the order and you will know within a fortnight whether you're looking at the real opportunity or an expensive daydream. Let me be concrete about who I think this is actually for, because it isn't for everyone. The owner who already holds a land, if you own R2 block, particularly one you have held for a while, particularly one near the nominated centers, you are in the strongest position of anyone listening, and the land cost is historical. You are not competing at auction for a site. That's an enormous head start, and most people holding it don't know they have it. The investor with the equity and patience, if you have got usable equity, borrowing capacity, and you can tolerate 18-month project with no rent coming in for part of it, this is way to create an additional dwelling rather than compete for the existing one, which in the market where everyone is bidding on the same tired stock is a genuinely different game. The buyers who is about to purchase anyway, if you are buying in these regions regardless, then checking zone and walking distance cost you nothing and might completely change with block you choose. Two similar houses, similar price, one inside the catchment and one outside, that's not a close call. And here is the one I underline. There are people sitting now selling blocks without knowing what the blocks became. That was nearly David, not because anyone misled him, simply because nobody had told him, and there is no letter in the post when the rule changes. Now quickly, because I know a good number of you are listening from elsewhere, not from New South Wales, every state is moving in the same direction: infill, second dwelling, gentler density near transport, but the rule and the labels are genuinely different, and I'm not going to summarize them badly in 60 seconds. What I would say is this: the question travel even when the answer don't. What's my zone? What's my minimum lot size and frontage? Can I build a second dwelling? Can that be subdivided? Can it have its own title or strata? Can it be rented to a third party or to a family? Because that one varies state by state and it completely changes the investment case. Ask those 5 questions of your own counsel and you will be ahead of most of the people in your street. So what should you do this week? 3 things, all cheap. Number 1, find your zone and measure your walk. For the property you own and for the large property you seriously considered buying, council planning map for the zones, maps app on the walking mode for the distance, 10 minutes each. Number 2, order a section 10.7 planning certificate for any property you own in this region, roughly $160. It tells you your zone, your overlays, your heritage status, your hazards, everything in the step 3 exclusion list and in one document. It's a best value piece of paper in Australian property and hardly anybody buys one until they are mid-transaction. Number 3, if step 1 and 2 comes back promising, run numbers 1 and 2 on the feasibility, floor space ratio, land time area of your envelope, and then rough build cost using the per square meter figures which I gave you. That's an evening work and it will tell you whether to spend the real money on the planner. Do those 3 things and you will know more about your own block than you have in your entire time you owned it. So back to David. He didn't sell his property, he ordered the certificates, he walked through the 4 numbers together, and he is currently on the design of the dual occupancy with the view of the subdividing. It might not proceed. His contributions figure hasn't come back yet and that could change the answer. He knows that, but he's making an informed decision about the asset he actually understands instead of selling something he didn't knew he had. That's the whole difference and it cost him a phone call and a planning certificate. If you would like us to look at your block with you, one which you own or one you are planning to purchase, come and book a strategy session with A&P Buyer Agency. We'll go through the zone catchment, what the site can carry and whether the numbers are worth chasing. If this was useful, follow the show and please send it to someone who owns a house near the train station, and there are a lot of people out there who own something more valuable than they realize and no one is going to write to them about it. I am Anita Kumar and this has been A&P Podcast, Shaping Futures Through Smarter Buying. Take care of yourself and I will see you in the next episode.